All right, here we're removing the bezel around the radio. It just simply pops off with a little pry tool, disconnecting the hazard lamp switch. There are 4 8mm screws that you'll disconnect, and it simply pulls out, and there's some connectors on the back that you'll disconnect. You'll see how to connect that later. There are small plastic tabs around this bezel that's on the radio front. There are several screws that you have to remove first. You'll see which ones in this video. I'd do my best to try to show all of the screws in this video. I apologize if it's not perfect. I did speed this video up to try to shorten the time. This is the first time I've actually removed this radio and done this, but it did work perfect when I got it all back together. Once those screws are removed, there's some small plastic tabs. I used a little plastic pry tool to carefully lift up on these. You don't want to pry too much. It did accidentally clip back while I was doing this, clip back on the bottom, so I had to turn it back over and unclip them again. One thing I figured out in this video, and I'll show you here in just a second, there is a PCB board that's attached with 2 screws on the top. It makes this a lot easier because there's plastic tabs, but it actually slides out with the front face. I'll show you here in just a second what 2 screws those are. As you can see, that PCB board plastic clips on that is actually preventing me from lifting it up. I end up looking at it a little bit carefully here in a second, and I figure out that those plastic tabs are catching on that PCB board. So those are the plastic clips that are holding it in for me, and I figure out here in a second that I'm not going to be able to pull it all the way away from it because there's a ribbon cable, and you might as well just remove the 2 screws. And those are the 2 screws that are with it, and that'll just pull off with the faceplate. Makes it a lot easier if you just do that to begin with. There you have it. There are 2 ribbon cables, so don't pull real hard when you get this off. There's 2 little ribbon cables that are attached to this before you can pull it off. If you'll use a little plastic pry tool or a screwdriver, I think I use a screwdriver in here. I try to show this to the best of my ability in here with a flashlight, but there's 2 little clips on each one of these ribbon cables, and they simply just lift down. I'll try to show it right here a little bit better. There's a little lever right there. See there, I'm going to close it one more time for you. Open it, and the ribbon cable will just pull out. The other one is significantly longer. Be careful with this. You want to pry on one side a little bit, pry on the other side, maybe pry in the middle slowly. If you break that little locking arm off, it's toast. You're never going to be able to get it tightened back up again. And you see when I loosen that little lever, the ribbon cable just pulled out. And there you have it. It's disconnected. Now we can start taking apart the faceplate. I'm sorry if anything is off screen here. I'm trying my best to get everything in. If you have any questions, please just drop a comment below. There are 6 ribbon cables attached to this middle PCB board, and that's what we're trying to get behind because the Digitizer is at the very front of all that. So Some of these mechanisms you'll see slide out, and I just use my nails to slide it forward to unclip it, and some are actually the lever style. I did forget right there on the left hand side of the screen, I forgot to loosen that one ribbon cable, which here in a second it's off screen, but there are 6 ribbon cables that have to be disconnected, removed from that PCB board. So just be really careful with those. Try not to bend them too much. Ribbon cables are very delicate. If you crimp them too much, you'll break the copper foil that's in them, and it won't be any good anymore. I'm trying to figure out what screws need to be removed here. That little heat plate or protective plate comes off, and then I carefully remove that PCB board, set it aside. And this metal plate that PCB board was attached to is held in with 4 screws. 3 are easily accessible with a screwdriver. And then I figure out there's one that you cannot access because one of the adjacent PCB boards is in the way. So what I end up doing is loosening that PCB board on the side to allow free access so I can get to that screw. And you'll see that here in just a second. There's the first screw coming out. I showed you where that one screw was. It's covered up. Second screw out of that board. Third. Fourth. And I am putting all these screws on a magnet. I have several magnets off to the side. I'm organizing them so I know where they came from in the order that I took it apart. Now, I try to remove the whole PCB board here, and then I realize the volume knob is attached to it, and I'm like, I can just access it by moving it out of the way. That was the last screw for that metal plate. I simply lift up that metal plate, carefully moving that PCB board out of the way, and it just comes out. That is your actual LCD screen. Below that, there is a rubber gasket that you see is right on top of the digitizer. Set that off to the side, and that is your digitizer. That is what we are replacing. Grab your new digitizer, and I'll put a link below to the digitizer that I used, and it worked just fine. Perfect fit. There's some protective film on the digitizer. Don't forget to take that off. Make your screen look fuzzy. Try not to touch the digitizer, because if you put any fingerprints on the inside of that, you are not getting them off when you put this thing back together. Digitizer goes in along with that gasket. Carefully fit it in. Make sure it's around those little alignment tabs. Now it all goes back together. Reverse order of operations here. We're gonna carefully put that LCD screen in. I was about to put it in upside down there, then I realized the alignment pins didn't line up. Carefully move that PCB board again out of the way. And once you get it lined up, you'll see it kind of drop into place. We're gonna put those 4 screws back in that were around that LCD screen. And then that PCB board off to the side, I think it's the volume knob. We're going to put the screws back into that one. I leave a few loose at first. I don't tighten them all the way because just want to make sure everything aligns. Once I got about 2 or 3, and then I'll tighten them. Once that's back in, now it's time to put that PCB board back in. You want to be careful not to trap any of those ribbon cables underneath this PCB board when you go to put it back in. So I'm carefully pulling ribbon cables out from underneath it because they want to curl up underneath. Look around, make sure you don't have any ribbon cables attached underneath. It would be a terrible day if you end up putting a screw through a ribbon cable or pinched it and damaged one. I'm gonna put that metal heat shrink, or heat shroud rather, on the back of those chips there. And then I'm gonna start putting all the screws back into this. Can't remember how many screws there were. I think there were like six screws, as well as the 6 ribbon cables. And then I'm gonna slowly start putting these ribbon cables back in. You want to make sure that they seat all the way and they look even. Some of these have a white line on the back side of the ribbon. Some of them have blue tape. What you're looking for is to make sure that that line is parallel with your actual connector, and that tells you it's seated in all the way and seated evenly. When you do this, when we go to start reassembling, I would say, just in case it doesn't function correctly when you get it back in the car, it'll be easier to disassemble. So I would leave some of the screws out for the bezel when we put it back on the actual radio. And that way, if something doesn't work, you can take it back to the table and it's easier to disassemble. Now these 2 ribbon cables, they were a bit of a pain. I probably worked a total of 10 minutes just on these ribbon cables because you only have about 1 inch maybe to 1/2 inch of room to work with both of these ribbon cables. But I used my fingers on the wide one, and I had to use some forceps and a finger for the smaller one to try to seat it in. The smaller cable seemed to be a bit more difficult because it wanted to pop out. And I managed to get it in there and fold that lever down to lock it in place. And before you close it up, just make sure that they're even too. Snap the faceplate back on the radio. Start putting those 2 screws in that we removed earlier. Now don't show it here, but I actually took this to the car after putting these 2 screws in to make sure that it functioned correctly. And it did. I took it back out, took it back to the table, finished putting these screws in the back side back in fully. I think I forgot to speed my camera up here. Sorry about that. I think there's 5 total screws that hold the faceplate to the radio. That last one's on the top, just right of center, right there. Don't tighten these too much. These screws, they thread into plastic. You'll end up cracking the plastic or breaking a screw. Just bottom them out and just a little tweak to snug it up. Here we go, putting it back in. Just try to remember when you take this out which order that the connectors go in, but you can't mess them up. The connectors will only go in their respective connectors. So it's back in. You'll gently set it back into the dash. There's nothing special here. Once you get it back seated, you'll put those 4 8mm screws back in. I used a magnet, telescoping magnet, to start them just a little bit. and then finish tightening them. I didn't show it here, but I put that bezel back on. Don't forget that hazard light switch connector that's on the back of that, and it simply just pushes and snaps back into place. You'll feel it snap. Just apply firm pressure around the outside of that, and you'll feel it snap into place. And here I show you it working. Touchscreen works now where it did not work at all before. Buttons actually work. Good deal. It's all fixed. Thanks for watching.